Welcome back to my kitchen. Man, have I got something for you today. This is a family favorite. My kids just eat this up. They love it. I cook it for myself when I'm alone. This is just fantastic. So it's going to be simple because that's the way I like to do things, but it's going to be really flavorful. So we're making golden burritos today. And there is a secret ingredient that I put in those that I'm going to hold on to until we actually get to cooking it. But for now, let's go ahead and get to our prep work so we can get to cooking. We're going to use onion, some cloves of garlic, some additional spices, some Mexican hot sauce. We've got refried beans. We're going to mix that in with our burrito meat. And we're going to use pinto beans. We're going to use pinto beans because that gives it a little bit extra bulk and it really makes it satisfying. So, of course, we're going to use a pound of meat, ground burger, ground deer, whatever you have. As always, especially when you're cooking with your kids or cooking for your kids, the finer you can get this stuff diced up, minced up, the smoother it's going to go come actual eating time, especially if your kids aren't used to garlic and onions and any other vegetables that you want to try to introduce. That, of course, I mean, we don't want to mince our lettuce up, but pretty much everything else other than our lettuce and tomato, if we're using them. I'm not going to use tomato because the way I think about it is if you have some hot sauce or picante sauce, you're already going to put tomato in there. So I don't go out of the way to cut up tomatoes. I figure they'll be introduced through the sauces. And I'm going to go ahead and use this whole onion. As I've discussed in my last video, onion just adds a lot of bulk to it, and it mixes in. As long as you get it cut small enough, it's going to mix in with your meat and beans and all that kind of stuff, almost to the point where you're not going to notice it. As long as you don't leave it in huge hunks, it'll melt down right into your mixture. You don't have to use the whole onion. You can use half an onion. I just kind of feel like using a whole onion today. I don't really want to store an onion in the refrigerator, so I'm going to go ahead and use the whole thing today. You could keep chopping that even finer, but that's fine enough for me. A lot of it's very fine, and there's enough of it that you're gonna have a few pieces, which is fine, a few big hunks, which is fine. Just it shows that there's onion in there rather than just rather than just being able to taste it. Of course, if you got really finicky kids, well, then you're gonna have to adjust. But you can get away with putting a lot of stuff in your food as long as it's not large enough for your kids to recognize it. Until they lose those preconceptions that something is not good. And all kids have their perceptions about foods. And really the only way that you can get them over it is getting them to try it. Sometimes you got to be sneaky. Now the reason I use only about 3/4 of that pepper is because it's a very large pepper. So I'd say we probably have a full normal size jalapeno pepper. Unless you live in the Valley of the Giants and they're all that big. But these peppers that I have right now are abnormally large for the ones that I usually purchase. That's just what they had. Again, you may need to personally go smaller or finer depending on your kids, your family. So, but that's fine. Alright, so we got our prep work done. Now it's time to actually do the cooking. So let's get started on that. I use my large skillet like I do so often. This is deer burger. That's what I have right now, and it's going to taste fantastic. Ground beef's fine, ground chuck, whatever you want to use. So here we have some ground peppercorn, onion powder, and some cayenne pepper powder. We're just going to put that in there. We're going to take all our vegetables we're going to go ahead and mix those in. Turn on our fire. And break up this meat and mix all that onion and pepper and garlic in. This is how I like to do all my brown recipes when there's vegetables, is I like to go ahead and mix them in and cook them with that. I don't want to just mix them in afterwards. I want those flavors to get good and mingled in there. We're just going to keep stirring this until all the meat is browned. Okay, while that's browning, I'm going to add my secret ingredient. Okay, so this is something you can add. You don't have to add it. It's not golden burritos if you don't. It'll make great regular burritos. But I'm going to add this and get this mixed in good. And this is a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. And that's where that golden color is going to come from, but it's also going to give it a bit of a kick. Not a bad kick. I mean, it's not going to be so powerful you can't stand it. There's been a lot of publications come out about the benefits. You may initially give your kids a bit of an off-putting look, but if you make a burrito for them, the first burrito, they won't taste anything. They're gonna love it, and at least if your kids are willing to make their own on burritos, they'll make their next burrito by themselves. Like I said, you're just going to completely brown that meat and get all those good flavors mixed up in there. Turn it down for a minute. Okay, so that's got our meat browned. I'm going to take my refried beans and go ahead and mix them in there. And the reason I started mixing my refried beans in is because when you have taco night, or we call it taco night, it's really burrito night, but when you have just refried beans on the table in a free choice kind of way, everybody gobs the meat up and they leave the beans, so you're left with beans. And there's not enough for everybody because, and you need the juices, so go ahead and just pour all that in. They eat all the meat up, leave the beans, so not everybody gets as many burritos as they would. So that's another reason for mixing all this stuff together and not giving people free choice. Because you'll go through a whole lot of the premium, the meat. Everybody wants meat. In my family, everybody wants meat on their burritos. You'll go through all that and they'll let a lot of the stuffings off. Like they'll take the cheese, but the beans are gonna be so sparing you'll have beans left over. So I've just found it goes a lot farther if you mix it all in. Having those pinto beans in there, that's just going to add a whole lot of bulk and a whole lot of flavor. It's going to add a texture, kind of a meaty texture, like you're actually getting more. Really, that's not so bad. That doesn't look that off-putting as far as the golden part. Like I said, I add my hot sauce in there, and that gives that a little bit more of a reddish tint. We want this to be kind of thick. I hate drippy burritos. They're more messy. And they just don't seem to be as satisfying. Okay, so we've cooked it down. And it'll thicken up after we let it rest for a little bit. While it's resting, while we're eating our first burrito, it'll thicken up. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I like to put my cheese on the bottom so that it'll kind of get melted from the... Okay, so then I take my lettuce, put my lettuce across the top. I really like these dispensers because they're so much easier to apply sour cream in a neat fashion. And roll that bad boy up. So that's how you make your golden burritos. So bon appetit. Oh yeah, that's good.